All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Data is Love. Super excited to have with me Dr. Pierce or Dr. OG this morning to talk about all things equity innovation. He is the head of equity innovation at a firm called Think Rubik's. And Pierce, can we just start with learning a little bit about the studio and the work that you do there? And also, like, where do you live?
Absolutely. Where I live is, I'm going to say it so Americans can say it, and I'm going to say it how folks from here can say it. So, Gaborone is the city, it's the capital city of Botswana. So, but we say Gaborone because G's sound like that in the language. That's where I am. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks to you for inviting me to this great space. I am the director of the studio that supports building knowledge towards equitable social change. In Think Rubik's, we're a collection of three separate studios that focus on uh, vertical integration of different expertises towards social change issues. Obviously, from our side, we focus on research, we focus on design, we focus on facilitation and the building of knowledge. We have the storytelling studio that shapes stories, builds narratives, builds digital assets to help support that work. And then we have the engagement studio that moves people. They've had experience on Capitol Hill, they've had experience supporting and engaging with grassroots campaigns, and they use that expertise to build to bear towards any issue that needs people, which is all of them, to move social change forward.
I don't think in all of the times that we've chatted, I've heard you say building knowledge towards equitable social change. Um, say more. Say more what all that entails, because of course, like this live is called Data is Love, and we need some data sometimes to build knowledge. So what does it look like in like the day-to-day of your life?
I'm glad that you ask because we're gonna riff off your theme, right? If data is love, we put the love into the social change work. That's what it is. Like that, there
Woo!
are many different forms and concepts and ideas of what it takes to do social change, to move people, institutions, cultures, hegemonies towards a more equitable future, right? And in doing that, there's a lot of people that have ideas, that have feelings, that have thoughts, that have experience that hasn't been validated, recognized, structured, disseminated, um, catalyzed. Let's add any verb that helps support the movement of that change. It's our job to activate it. So using the data, whether it's conducting mixed method research, whether it's facilitating and building out infrastructure for learning. So that means building out curricula or teaching that curricula. If that means guiding people towards what the space should look like so that the knowledge is usefully constructed, or like most of my design strategy nerds, using my fields, whether it's design, whether it's innovation practice, whether it's evaluation capacity building or international development to help guide what the future should look like based on the vision that you want and the resources that you have.
I love this so much. And I'm just going to say we've been doing Data is Love for 9 months now. We do it every single week. And I don't think anybody has used the word hegemony on this program for the entirety of the 9 months that we've been doing it. In fact, I think that it might have been probably 5 years since I've last heard that word just dropped into casual conversation, hegemony. So we our plan is to talk about equity innovation and building better futures. And you've already started to talk about different components of it, but I'm hoping that we could backtrack a little bit and maybe have you define for us equity and innovation, because they can mean lots of different things to lots of different people.
Yes, it can. And it does on purpose, honestly, because there's people like dealing with definitions in a different way than I like dealing with them. They use them as boxes when I like using them as seeds, opportunities to figure out what could be possible based on what a word means. So let's start with the boxes, right? Here's my favorite definition, my working definition of equity first. Fairness across difference. That's my favorite one. It in its perfect world recognizes the history, the past, the context that created why there is unfairness between different communities, from the margins, from the center, what have you. But that's what I like focusing on: fairness across difference. Now, when it comes to innovation, my favorite definition, also working, is the creation of a new artifact that is supposed to benefit a population. 4 parts: new artifact, benefit, population, right? And the way that people usually deal with that topic, there's one reason why it's so difficult to tease out what it is versus what people use it as, is because we have a culture around innovation always being a good thing, right? It is hegemonic. It's a part of the culture. It's a part of the focus to say if you create a thing, no matter what, it should be good, and that's a problem, because that's why I think about combining the two words together, because traditionalist forms of innovation that are apolitical, that are technocratic, that focus on humans' power over other things, which is exploitative in many ways, not just towards other humans, follows the same logic as the one that's exploiting our planet, as the one that's causing divisiveness, as the one that's causing the centrality of power towards the people that design, manufacture, and are most benefited by the tech, instead of focusing on the folks at the margins that could, in its best form, with the right capacity, tools, resources, access, experience, could make new artifacts benefit themselves, benefit other unadvocated for communities, and better benefit the world. So equity innovation is the combination of those two concepts, that it's trying to make the process of change.
Make the process of change. Okay, we'll put that on a poster and stare at it until it starts to make sense to some of us that tend to be a little bit slower. Make the process of change. So why this lens?
Yeah.
Why not just innovation? Why not equitable social movements, right? I think that this is a real intentional pairing of words for you.
It is. Absolutely. It's intentional because I'm going to bring up those 2 examples that you described. Why not just innovation? I'm going to name some recent, very powerful, very influential innovations. Cyber surveillance. That's one example. Right. Let's see. One of the outcomes that's been affecting a lot of different people is all of the ways people have been exploited by destructive cryptocurrency culture, right? I could name a lot of other examples, but the point here is if you just put the phrase innovation by itself, it's since the 1920s, when Joseph Schumpeter was the superstar economic philosophist that constructed why innovation should be the core machinery to how our economy changed, moved, and evolved, it became, to be clear, because this wasn't the case. 1600s, 1700s, innovation was actually a bad word. It was a insult to the religion and to the state. But since that happened, it created a space where people in power could leverage the process of creation using the same logic, to be clear, like intellectual property, but the same logic of I build this, I own this, and I can keep making money off of it no matter how much energy or work I put into the labor of the thing, right?
Yeah.
So it's there are many examples of advocacy that people use for social change. Let's get into that second point, that rails against the creation of new things. And for real reasons, because a lot of innovations are created and people lose their jobs, people lose their livelihoods, people lose access to certain conversations. How many times when Facebook was starting up, and when Twitter started up, when people said, I don't feel connected to the world, I don't know where to get my information. And also misinformation, they get an opportunity to abuse the message that people put out into the world, right? So my point is that both of these worlds need to work together because we need to actively move the arc of progress. It's not something that just actively happens. We need to push that ourselves towards people that are marginalized and have been for years. And because it is human, it is inherent to create. It is a thing that we will not get rid of and that we don't want to get rid of. And especially because when anybody talks about justice and liberation, one of the most important things for people that do this work well isn't just to critique what's happening, it's to offer alternatives.
That last point has been one of my biggest challenges with, I would say, the state of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're starting to have a lot of language to critique and not a lot of solutions or a really, a grounded approach. But I'm still stuck on where you started this segment around innovation and is all innovation good? Like we're married to the idea culturally that innovation means something's better. And you started with the example of cyber surveillance, and I've been spinning for the last couple of weeks on the duality of that particular bit of innovation. One part of it is I'm an auntie to many amazing kids. And one of the acts of auntie-ism that I'm undertaking is putting together albums of these children that I've known for like their whole entire lives. And you know what? Now I can feed photos of a kiddo and then have generated all of the other places where their photos show up, right? So this process of putting together an album becomes a little bit faster for me. And I don't have to go through 15 years of photographs month at a time. And on the other hand, I've just been sitting with what's happening, similar technology, right, being used in Israel, where they have posted machine guns at the entrances where Palestinians are coming in, and similar technology. It's like the facial recognition piece. And like, can I use it to like make the best photo album, or can I use it for something so cruel and so violent? So I'm just sitting, so like it is an innovation for sure. And what is the use case? What's the use case of it?
This is a constantly evolving problem. This issue adapts and evolves with the new things that come out. I think one of the best ways to think about any of the innovations that do come out isn't whether it's good or it's bad per se at its beginning. It's that it's an inflection point. It is an opportunity for, especially if the technologist is good at what they do and people care about it, once they make it, it's no longer theirs. It is something for society to build, shape, and adapt around it. And it, like many other technologies that have been built, they are representations of the ways that we want to be superhuman, why we want to expand past ourselves, to do something, to exert power over something else. And all of these things are not magic. They clearly have used science in a way that moved faster than we recognize, but they are rendered invisible to the lay person about what can be done with it, which is why you run into those use cases like you just described, right? So I think what's important and what I've tried to learn from society and technology studies scholars is recognizing that most of the things that we have tried to build, many of the things, let me not say most, they go through certain swells of activity. The first swell is kind of like the move fast, break things swell. Like the people in power build something and it's useful and they purport how amazing and fantastic the thing will be to the rest of the world. And then over time, unless people have seen it and then adapted with it for a long period of time, you start to see the struggles, the intricacies, the tensions, all the ways that people are using it. It's not always good, it's not always bad, right? But part of the reason why it's hard is also because the culture, one big culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion is recognizing correction. It is a space of critique. Most of the time they try to be productive and they try to say like, this thing needs to be fixed and addressed and what have you, right? But it's also part of the reason why the narrative around these folks are talking about all you can do is critique. That's why social justice warrior became an epithet. It became a bad word and something that people could advocate against in a lot of other communities that I don't associate with. So the struggle is recognizing you build something, you have an intention for it, but the thing, you need to recognize it past when you put it out in the world. And also, there are all types of good technologies that also have complicated relationships, from curb cuts in cities, from, you understand what I'm saying? Like there are so many other instances of technological developments, sometimes that are more invisible because they're not the new shiny thing that we care about, that have helped a lot of people and helped society. But maybe that means we just need to think more long term about what its impact should be.
It almost sounds like the work that you do using equity innovation, it's almost like the slow food movement. You're not just you're not innovating for the sake of innovating. That like you're really pausing to recognize, to notice, to push back. And I'm wondering, like, will you give us an example of what this looks like in practice? Some project that you worked on recently that kind of like helps us, I don't know, feel more connected to this idea of equity innovation, so that what we don't do at the end of this conversation is take it back to our organization and boil it to something really small, like innovation is not good.
Yes, understood. Absolutely, I can do that. I'm glad you brought up the slow food movement because it reminds me of how many communities use different words for the same principles and movement that they're trying to espouse, and the need of bringing those realities together to work together to make a new, better future, right? So an example that comes to mind comes from a community that does exactly that. It's dealing in the work of organizing. So when thinking about the future, the Deep South in the United States is rarely the first region that people think should contribute to the conversation. There's a lot of different reasons why that's the case. From Arkansas being one of the least educated U.S. states, ranks near the bottom in terms of percentage of population with high school and college degrees. They lag behind many other states with broadband infrastructure and access. And Black Arkansans are incarcerated at roughly 4 times the rate of white Arkansans, right? So when people talk about what the future should be, obviously discussions around who should be a part of that, it ain't that, right? That's what we like to change. That's what why we like to bring in why spaces of movement and organizing are actually building a future we can all depend on. There was a entity called the Brown Black Power Coalition that was founded about 4 years ago with some of my colleagues that has been working with tensions, with communities, with issues that said, we want to come together because there's political and economic power to move work forward. We just don't know what we want to do together, right? So through my firm, through my research expertise, through my colleagues' branding expertise, through administrative work, we recognize the value of one idea that could bring everyone together, and that's the concept of mentorship. We built an organizing accelerator that we call the Movement Institute. It's currently running. We've been working towards building out a curriculum that's obviously EI's piece in it, guiding the colleagues that have had decades of organizing experience nationally, and supporting the branding and work to get the word out about the initiative that helps 10 different change makers in the state get organizing praxis over 6 months, learning the methods, the activities, the benefits, the ways that they can work and build together as a community towards their own initiatives, and so that they can support each other in different work and activities. So to be clear, the idea that you could build a teaching space, obviously that's not new. A space towards organizing, that's not new. Connecting people in a way that can help them help each other, that is not new. What might be new is the fact that a foundation's funded it. The Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation supported a hefty amount of funds to support these initiatives once they've been completed. And they're continuing to, there's a lot of conversation about what the next things can become for the project. For instance, spreading the lessons to other programs. We've already been to a conference teaching them about how to initialize their own programs in their own spaces. Building out grassroots organizing research instead of relying on folks in behind the silos of academia, having folks that need to do organizing collate and spread their research to other folks. And then scaling across contexts. Clearly, there's been a focus on Arkansas with the leverage point. These small folks can make a massive change in this one state. But what about other places? What about other environments? What about other people that can be a part of that initiative? So that's an example, and it works specifically because of the framework that the people most proximate to the problem should be involved in building out the solution.
People that are most proximate to the problem should be involved in building the solutions is also not a new idea, right? We know this intellectually and theoretically, and we say it all of the time. And I guess I'm curious to know, you probably explored lots of different ideas, and then you said that there was one that really stood out, the value of one idea, this focus on mentorship. What led you to that? And in that is a little bit of a leading question is, what are the different points of data that you considered, along with the context of like working in the Deep South, working in Arkansas, that led you to, right, like this idea is what's going to create the most leverage?
Yes, understood. And I see the link. Data's love. Let's tease out the love, right? The data were not was were complicated, nuanced, and contextual. There's a lot of different insights that we built and collected to move this forward. Um, we held focus groups constantly for months on end to learn about the context that everyone was coming from, the work that they were trying to accomplish, and what they felt Arkansas needed to support uh, a Black Brown Power Coalition. Um, we listened to them. It was a lot of qualitative analysis. I asked a collection of questions about what your personal capacities were, what issues you feel like you personally need help with when we were trying to figure out how to make quick wins, direct connections between people that were trying to meet in the space, right?
Yeah.
We there's at the same time there's a lot of data that couldn't have been held by an external evaluator. There was relationships that were built over time. There were some for people that and a lot of them were built on trust and ways that trust was failed. Right? It was relational relationships. So who could be a part of this afterwards? Who, if you want to put a number to it, one example is if someone's trying to build a relationship, who put in the sweat equity, how many hours over a certain amount of time, how much frequency, right? We can get quant if we want to, right? But also the relationship is non-linear, right? It's not you keep putting in information over and over and over, then you're going to expect a consistent result. Sometimes there's a phrase, never let a crisis go to waste, right? The crisis / opportunity. There's certain we held meetings. Some people left, some people came back, some people said they didn't see exactly where it was going because it needed a bit more time to gestate. And we saw the people that were deep in the project saying, actually, we should push this thing forward. And we built an initiative that everyone could believe in, that not everyone needed to be in the room to describe, right? That a lot of designers don't recognize that special skill set, that sometimes participatory design, you put too many people in a room, too many cooks in the kitchen, right? Additionally, it's dynamic, right? It changes and adapts based on the needs of the community and the context. Like anything that is political, you are constantly looking for opportunities to learn and adapt and build. The point I guess I'm trying to make is that the data collected to determine whether or not this was the thing that made sense mirrored the context of the community that needed it in the first place. I named a few principles. It's nonlinear, it's relational, it's dynamic, and there are many others that come to mind, but it must align with the goal that they're trying to describe, which is everyone being on the same page and agreeing that this is something we all need and we need to move forward to address so that data can help support that endeavor.
Okay, so do you remember when you were getting your PhD, and no doubt you had to file at least one, if not multiple IRB requests, right?
Boom! Yes, of course.
So many, and I think for anybody that's listening, IRB stands for the Internal Research Board. There's like a method to this madness of writing it in a way where it gets accepted so you can go out and do your work in a manner that is like hopefully ethical, right? And what's lost, I mean, I think that there is value to IRB processes in many instances. And I think that what's lost is the things that you named, which is that a lot of this is relational. It is nonlinear. It is dynamic. It is adapting to the needs of the community and the context. It is shifting. And I think that most of the time when evaluators are working, and evaluators can be in, I think, a philanthropic context, they could be like data analysts inside of an organization. Evaluators take many different titles and names and shapes and forms, but there's a push so often to lay out your method and your process and your questions on day one and commit to seeing it through, regardless of what else is happening.
Would you like to know a secret? I have a secret for you that I don't tell
Uh,
many people.
Okay.
My last chapter of my dissertation is exactly about that topic.
Can,
Literally, it is. So my PhD largely is about the Botswana innovation ecosystem. Remember when we talked about different disciplines doing the same issue, same
yeah,
thing? So
yeah.
in innovation practice, the core, like the piece that like brought everything together was the large debated field of design thinking, right? And it was a ethnographic analysis. It was me being in the space, trying to connect with how many places and people I could engage with to support
Mm.
the work and how it could build in the fast. It adapted, it evolved. And exactly that happened because I needed to fill out two IRBs for one project. Anyone who's done international work, one for the University of Botswana and one for University of California, Berkeley. And a point here I think that's really powerful, I'm gonna riff even more on it, is how similar that is to certain structures of DEI as a structure, right? It not only about the feeling of it being you need adaptability, you need it to be relational, like you move at the speed of trust and all those things, but recognizing who that structure is made to protect. So, for folks that don't know, the the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion became a thing. It arose in the early 60s to avoid inaction that John F. Kennedy outlined at the beginning of the decade. They told government contractors to take affirmative action to ensure that employees be treated fairly irrespective of their race, religion, and nationality. And in doing that, it became a resource and has built into a culture of protection for the companies in similar ways that HR has been built out in that firm, right? So IRBs, in the very same way, it's a field of protection, reliably, understandably, in the language of ethics, for institutions, for universities, right? So a core part about it when you're doing any of this research, when you're trying to collect quant or qual data, you need to be asking the question, who is this for and how can you prove to them that it's going to be for them? And normally we're at these big institutions and you do so to keep your job, to keep your funding, to keep your the bona fides. I'm a professor and you should listen to me because instead of building that trust with the communities that we say we want to be in community with. Are you there for the big institution, like Paulo Freire talks about, or are you there for and with the people? Prove it.
Yes. Oh, this is bringing up so much post-trauma trauma from my own IRB process that was more than 10 years ago, 12, 15 years ago. But it's also, I think, Pierce, what I'm thinking about is some of the organizations that my firm supports and the standard of ethics as it is applicable in a high income country, but high income in like the what is, you know, the per capita, regardless of like 70% of the population living in poverty, i.e. America, the United States, and what is the standard of ethics when you're working in a low and middle income country, often in the global south, and the practices that are acceptable in the global south would never pass any IRB review if the same thing was happening here in these United States in a high income community specifically. And you know, and so coming back to equity and innovation, I think, holy crap, like, are we slowing down enough to even ask the right questions, or knowing what the right questions are to ask as we set out to change the world? And so many of us feel like that's our personal theory of change. Our personal mandate is to go out and change the world. And we're trying to work at this breathless pace. And who does
I
that serve?
completely agree. I, it actually, this is hitting on all cylinders, because that last piece that you talked about, I actually also wrote about. I have an article called "Your Super Special Skill Set Might Get in the Way of Social Progress." That, look for super special skill set and you'll find it. And the focus is on that recognition, that idea that us highly us that were good at performing and building an identity around our productivity, whether it's school, whether it's your professional space, whether it's how many businesses you own and how much money you make. When you try to do social change work, you realize you're stepping in landmines many, many times. And it happened to me. It just recently happened this year, where there are certain initiatives that you're trying to address that have equity opportunities connected to them, but the core thing that connects the incredibly diverse periphery, all the communities that are not white, from the West, male, heterosexual, rich, moneyed, what have you, is their relationship with a system that has traumatized them. It with that structure, with that institution, and all the ways we're building that. And I think a core thing to recognize whenever we're trying to do any of this work is hard, is going to continue to be hard. B, that social change in many ways is not about your feelings. How much of your ego is directly connected to whether or not you've made social change or not. And if you don't get that, how are you going to be hurt? And how might you hurt others? Right? It's hard to tease out. But if you're actually interested in doing that, that might mean ego sacrifices. That might mean bringing in other people that can help do that work. That might mean backing up and having those tough conversations for a system that's older than we can remember our own lineages many times. How old's your grandma? How old's your great-grandma, right? 400 years, longer. So changing this is going to take time, but it's possible because there were people that lived like this before the system existed. So we can make something new. It just might mean we have to get our ego out of the way.
Social change is not about your feelings. Will be my holiday greetings to all of my clients this year.
Nice. Make sure to sign my name too.
I'll be like, and attribution of quote is Dr. Pierce. So one of the last questions that I ask all of my guests on Data is Love is, let's say somebody's listening and they're like, gosh, like equity innovation, this is a lens with which I too want to work. I want to figure out how I use it, and maybe, yeah, like they should call you and they should hire Think Rubik's. But what are some of the things that they need to do before they would want to even bring in an external expert, facilitator, engager, researcher? Where do we start?
Thank you for the call out. This is why this people knowing what I need, knowing what we're trying to do. First, you need a meeting. You need a meeting with us. We need to meet you. We need to connect you. We need to find out if you're people, if the work that you're trying to accomplish, how we can support all those logistic, economic, consultancy type conversations, right? At the same time, I want to recognize that people need to recognize that a change needs to be made and that they might not have the skill sets to do it. It's a different skill set to take data and create the insights necessary through evaluation and the like. Different to facilitate a space, different to recognize what moves people and understands culture, different to be able to understand sub-narratives and move movements, move stories that help people understand why your work matters and how to put it in front of people so that they can feel motivated to the change you're trying to espouse. But at the same time, I want to note that we start where you start. We meet you where you are in the work. It's the different people are at different levels. We're working with, we've worked with some clients that are trying to address and create political structures of abolition. And we worked with other clients that don't recognize that they're a white man leading a hierarchical company that's saying they're trying to reformat and revolutionize a massive industry of other white men and all that, right? So in each one of those spaces, part of the hard work is it's not about saying what we can and what we can do, is recognizing the people that share our values, which we can have a conversation about. All these things that equity innovation are involved in that. But recognizing they need a shepherd to get to the next stage. Because our first white paper, the name of it is Equity Innovation as Just Transformation. That's how we define it. That's how we focus on it. And we recognize that people need to know we got to transform. If you're there, we'll figure out how to help you.
Okay.
I'll also, one final thing, go to our website, thinkrubics.com, and we'll start the conversation.
I'm just going to say, I don't often go to websites, and I'm struck by not only how beautiful they are, but also how functional, how intentional, and y'all's site in and of itself is just a beautiful, magical experience that I feel called to plagiarize from. And then I have to pause and I'm like, why would you want to do that?
Tristan, I know we got to clip this link. Tristan and Chu and Chris, they know who they're talking to. We got to clip that link and get that. So I got that. Thank you very much for that compliment. I'll make sure that my colleagues know that you gave that.
Yeah, I think that there is a method to the madness, right? I say method to the madness, and now I'm going to actually probably pause every time I say it, because there's a way in which websites are designed. I think there is a way in which work happens. And what you said, one of the last things that you said is like, you have to know that you need the shepherd. And so, I think often in the world of evaluation and research, there's a lot of commissioning of research for the sake of it. It's a check the box activity. You hire an external consultant because you have a budget, you have to spend it, you have to do the activity, and you're not in it for the outcome. You're not in it for the outcome. You don't necessarily want anything to change. You want to say we did a process. And my sense is that a big part of equity innovation, you have to deeply want to be shepherded towards something different, and be in it, and to be in it, right? So after this conversation, I know that I'm going to be thinking about not only my choice of words, but when I find myself doing a lot of the check the box activities, both with my clients and I think like with my community of practitioners in the workplace equity space. Pierce, I want to thank you. This is a gem of a conversation, and I know it's one that I'm going to come back to and listen to. I will also be the person grabbing clips from it, in addition to your colleagues. So thank you for being here with us. One last thing that I want to pop up into the banner, the ticker at the bottom, is something that you shared with us really early on, which is there are so many concepts and practices that offer a path towards sustainable and beautiful, non-exploitative alternatives. And yeah, and may we adopt some of them,
Yes.
because there are many options that are better than the status quo. So thank you.
Thank you very much for the time. That statistic, that resource is from the Pluriverse, a post-development dictionary. Look for a post-development dictionary; you'll be able to find it. I think it's even online for free in some places, but support them if you have ducats for it. It's a statistic that's supposed to represent the idea that we have been fooled into thinking that the way that we're moving uh, in the world, which is exploitative, which is built up and keeps producing oppressions, which builds certain type of technologies that, hey, am I going to use it? Who care, right? There are ways that we have lived and ways that people are creating that offer alternatives that are more for community, more for ecology, more for sustainability, more for support, more for the world that we should all want to live in, but we don't. So instead of thinking about all the things of the way that the world is bad, we can also think about the alternatives and try to shape our life, our relationships, our communities towards those. We have the opportunity. Let's take it.
Okay, that is a perfect note to close on. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a great week ahead. And to everybody else that's watching, have a great week ahead as well. And there's so much in this conversation to mulch on. I truly hope that you keep coming back to this conversation because it has been a gift to everybody. Thank you, Pierce.
Stay safe, everyone.